Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Vishnupad from Hamsa Parivajikacharya, so there's of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki, ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki, Anant Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Kun Radha Kul Giri Govardhan ki, Shri Vrindavan Nam ki, Shri Mayapur Dham ki, Ganga Mai ki, Yamuna Mai ki, Bhakti Devi ki, Tulsi Devi ki, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki, Dr. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nita Gaur Pramanandi, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Guru to Shri. Is there, this camera is like really up on my face. Is there any way we can like move it? And also like I can't see you guys. And you guys actually took the time to come to class. So I want to give, so I want to be able to give you guys my full attention. Although, thank you guys for joining on YouTube. But, it's kind of like Prabhupada said once, the Sankirtan devotees should get the best because they're going out and preaching. In other words, the people who actually take time out of their life to come into Bhagavatam class should be given nice treatment and attention. All right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya.
Narayanam Namaskritya.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Devim Saraswati Vyasam.
Kodayam Udirayet.
Kodayam Udirayet.
Nastaprayashu Bhadreshu.
Nastaprayashu Bhadreshu.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke.
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke.
Bhaktir Bhakti Nashiki.
Bhaktir Bhakti Nashiki.
Before saying the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance at classes on the Bhagavatam, what happens? Yes. Right. All right, so today we just started a new chapter. The four Kumaras have now come on the scene to join Prithu Maharaj's party. He's having a big yajna, and he's just finished instructing his citizens. And as stated last week, because of his rule, he made the planet completely sinless. And because of him making the planet completely sinless, this created an atmosphere, which then attracted the four Kumaras. As was discussed last week in class as well. When we create the nice atmosphere, people will come. Kelly said in that movie, if you guys ever saw it, The Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. You build a big baseball field and a cornfield. Anyway, so whenever you build a nice temple, a nice preaching center, or people who are naturally inclined to Krishna consciousness or spiritual life, they will come. So in the same way, when you start to create a more pure atmosphere, it attracts more and more advanced devotees. So here, the four Kumaras, who are the senior sons of Lord Brahma, they have shown up, and Prithu Maharaj is giving them nice reception. So these verses that we're going to discuss today, 4 and 5, because they both kind of go in the direction I've been wanting to go with this class. This is going to show how Prithu Maharaj received these personalities. And it's also going to teach us how saintly persons are meant to be received. So we'll do 4 together. Gauravarya Trita Sabhya Prashrayanata Kandara Dedivat Pujayam Chakre Grihita Darya Anasyanam Gauravarya Trita Sabhya Ashrayanata Kandara Dedivat Pujayam Chakre Grihita Dhyarhanasanam Gauravarya Trita Sabhya Asrayanata Kandara Dedivat Pujayam Chakre Grihita Dhyarhanasanam. Chant, you chant.
Gauravadyam Trita Sabhya
Alright, word for word. Gauravat, glories. Yam Tritaha, completely. Sabhya, most civilized. Pashraya, by humbleness. Anatta Kandara, bowing down his shoulder. Didivat, according to instructions of the Shastra. Pujayam, by worshipping. Chakre, performed. Grihita, accepting. Adi, including. Arhana, Paraphernalia for reception.
Paraphernalia for reception.
Asanan,
Asana.
sitting places.
Sitting places.
Translation. When the great sages accepted the reception according to the instructions of the Shastras, and finally took their seats offered by the king, influenced by the glories of the sages, immediately bowed down. Thus he worshipped the four Kumaras. Please repeat. When the great sages accepted their reception according to the instructions of the Shastras, and finally took their seats offered by the king, the king, influenced by the glories of the sages, immediately bowed down. Thus he worships the four Kumaras. Purports. The four Kumaras are Parampara spiritual masters of the Vaishnava Sampradaya. Out of the four Sampradayas, namely Brahma Sampradaya, Sri Sampradaya, Kumara Sampradaya, and Rudra Sampradaya, the disciplic succession of spiritual master to disciple is known as the Kumara Sampradaya is coming down from the four Kumaras. So Prithvi Maharaj was very respectful to the Sampradaya Acharyas. As it is said by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Shakshat Dharivana Samastra Shastre, a spiritual master or the Parampara Acharya should be respected exactly like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word Vidivat is significant in this verse. This means that Prithvi Maharaj also strictly followed the instructions of the Shastra in receiving a spiritual master or Acharya of the transcendental disciplic succession. Whenever an Acharya is seen, one should immediately bow down before him. Prithvi Maharaj did this properly. Therefore, the words used here are Pashrayanata Kandaraha. Out of humility, he bowed down before the Kumaras. Text 5. Tapara Sodra Sadisle Marjita Lakabandana Yatra Shilavatam Riktam Acharyam Manayaniva. Translation. After this, the king took the water which had washed the lotus feet of the Kumaras and sprinkled it over his hair. By such respectful actions, the king, as an exemplary personality, showed how to receive a spiritually advanced personality. Purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, Apani Acharya Prabhu Jivare Shikaya. It is very well known that whatever Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught in his life as Acharya, he himself practiced. When he was preaching as a devotee, although he was detected by several great personalities to be the incarnation of Krishna, he never agreed to be addressed as an incarnation. Does anyone know what Lord Chaitanya would do when somebody addressed him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead? He'd cover his ears, go Vishnu, Vishnu. Because in this age, everyone will say they are God. Lord Chaitanya came to teach how to be a devotee of God. He never agreed to be addressed as an incarnation. Even though one may be an incarnation of Krishna or especially empowered by him, he should not advertise that he is an incarnation. People will automatically accept the real truth in due course of time. Prithvi Maharaj was the ideal Vaishnava king. Therefore, he taught others by his personal behavior how to receive and respect saintly personalities like the Kumaras. When a saintly person comes into one's home, it is the Vedic custom first to wash his feet with water and then sprinkle this water over the heads of one in one's family. Prithvi Maharaj did this, for he was an exemplary teacher of the people in general. Om Ganatrinam Dashagananjana Shlakaya Chakshurumanitaminata Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Sthapitamyena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dharati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shita Parakamalam Shri Guru and Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitantam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Krishna Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahakana Lalita Shri Vishakam Shah Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhikata Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakapatribhishna Viva Sindhu Devi Patisma Bhavdevi Vaishnavi Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Giradhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So out of all aspects of Krishna consciousness, of course I would do something like that. Leave that to me. Where's the microphone? Okay, out of all the aspects of Krishna consciousness, one of the ones that took me the longest to accept, or the longest to not have an issue with, was this idea of worshiping somebody else, bowing down before somebody else. As I had mentioned in another class, that the first time I saw Guru Puja, it made me very uncomfortable. See people bowing down before Murti, bowing down before a person. Because every person that I had ever met was imperfect in some way, even spiritual leaders. So quite often to see worship of other personalities, I would think, okay, what did they do? What are they really doing behind the scenes? What's really going on? What crimes are they committing? Things like this. Because in Kali Yuga, you'll see this. There are many cheaters out there. I was listening to a lecture by Prabhupada in Honolulu yesterday. And Prabhupada was mentioning how in this Kali Yuga society, it's basically run by Sudras. We can see this in the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It starts off talking about the degradation of the kings. You know, you have one minister that murders a king, and then later Sudra murders that king and then gets on the throne. And so in Kali Yuga, you mainly have, Sudra type personalities that are in charge. So Prabhupada in this class, he defined Sudra as, one who has the propensity to kind of cheat others, to twist things. And he was talking about how they'll take the Shastra and make their own interpretation of it. He said, so the Sudra mentality is that there's that propensity to cheat others. And so because these types of people become in charge in society, it can cause this distrust that society will have for people that are supposed to be spiritual leaders. When I went home one time, my mother had friends that she had met from Delhi in Keshava. So he was working some construction, and my mom brought me to meet him. And because whenever she finds some nice boy that was around my age, she always wanted to introduce me. And so anyway, she introduced us, and we were sitting down talking, and he was telling me that, oh yes, you're chanting this Hare Krishna. My grandmother, she loved Krishna very much. She chanted Hare Krishna until her last breath. But for me, I see in India, these priests, these brahmanas, they just take people's money. Like this. He wasn't very much, into the whole culture of Krishna consciousness or into the idea of hearing from Guru, because he also had been exposed to so many cheaters. But we can see in society, people have this propensity to worship a great personality. And because the actual lower class people have gotten in charge The types of people that we tend to worship are movie stars, entertainers, personalities like that. So the first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, talks about how people who are kind of in the mode of passion, they will worship human beings or demigods, things like this. And you'll notice these people in the big entertainment industry, because we value entertainment so much in the 21st century, they get the best of everything. You know, so if you ever have seen the Super Bowl, they'll always show some other celebrity up in like the big box seat, you know, the big fancy seats that you got to pay about $20,000 to get into. They'll just get into it, no problem. When I was at the University of Florida, there were several people that had attended there that are now alumni that have become famous athletes. And so when one of them came through, there was a big, like, procession for them, and people were just going crazy and trying to receive them so nicely, giving them the nicest places to eat, the nicest places to sit. They didn't have to pay for anything. You know, people were almost worshiping them in this way. I'm from a very small town. So I remember one time, I don't know if you guys remember, there used to be a famous, or there maybe still is, like, for Tiger Woods. I don't know if he still plays. So if you guys, maybe you guys know or don't know, but, you know, what was it, maybe like 10 years ago, so he had this big scandal, like, with his wife, right? And so they filed for divorce, but they came to he stayed in South Florida somewhere, and they came all the way to my hometown to file for divorce in the courthouse. And I guess they did this because it's a more, you know, it's kind of, you got to go through several. If you're driving from South Florida to go to my hometown on the Gulf Coast, you got to drive through many places that are in the middle of nowhere, many redneck places. Your GPS will most likely lose signal, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the middle of nowhere. So I guess they get less media attention. But when they came, they're coming to file for divorce, and people are going crazy. Oh my God, Tiger Woods is here. And they're all at the courthouse, you know, waiting outside the courthouse. And he's coming there to get his divorce finalized, which isn't really an honorable thing. I mean, and yet still, people are showing up to give this person all sorts of types of worship, wanting him to eat in their restaurant, do this here, do this there. So I remember the great fanfare, you know, when people found out, and it was a secret thing. Nobody knew he was coming until he was there, but the news just spread all over the place. So there's this tendency to give this worship to these so-called great personalities within the world. And as part of one's eternal nature, you know, we have this desire to enjoy within ourselves. We're all in the Mayobi shot. At our very core, you can't get rid of this enjoying propensity, no matter what you do. So there are gross ways to enjoy and subtle ways to enjoy. And the subtle ways to enjoy are the ones that really make one kind of go mad. And that's why people tend to want fame. They tend to want money, because in turn, this gives you what's called profit, distinction, and adoration. And really, this is kind of what people want when they go after this gross sense gratification. So these people, you know, that people tend to worship nowadays in this Kali Yuga, you know, they're getting this profit, distinction, and adoration. And people see that and they think, oh, I want that. If I had a lot of money like this personality, people would respect me. People would adore me. You know, I'd be able to pay all the best plastic surgeons and stay handsome and stay beautiful for the rest of my life. I'd have the nicest car. You know, I'd have the nicest house. I'd have people throwing themselves at me. And even like if you're not going after it in a material way, you can go after it in a spiritual way. There are people who are, they take the spiritual life sometimes, they enjoy austerities because of the distinction that they might get from these types of austerities. I had a friend once that would do 14-day watermelon fast and then 10-day master cleanse all the time that he was doing these different types of fasts, you know, to different austerities, more austerities. Extremely cold showers, going up in the mountains in the snow, like Wim Hof types of things, because you get some sort of distinction or adoration from it. But oftentimes when that distinction or adoration goes away, people become depressed, they become illusioned. And what the actual general society doesn't see, when they're looking at these so-called great people, they don't see the problems that come with all of these things. Just like when I was younger, we used to play king and queen, I'm going to pretend to be the king, you're going to pretend to be the queen, or vice versa, or whatever. But if you actually are the monarch, there are so many issues that come with that they don't show. One, your spouse will be chosen for you, and it may be somebody you don't like. Two, there will be somebody that's ready to kill you because they want to overthrow you. You could be betrayed by your minister or best friend. You're always having to watch out. You're having to look out for other countries trying to invade you. It's a lot of anxiety. You have a lot of pressure to produce heirs. And then if you become some sort of a famous athlete or whatever, you can get involved in all sorts of scandals. Just like there's one right now that's involved in this whole, I was looking on YouTube, my YouTube feed sometimes brings up news headlines. And there's some athlete right now that's involved in some gambling scandal that his interpreter was taking his money and using his money to pay gambling fees. And gambling is quite illegal in his state, so he's in a lot of trouble. So you can get betrayed by people like that. That's the downside of the high life. But see, the thing is, the reason why in the Vedas that saintly persons are actually worshipped is because they can give instruction that will change somebody's life and perfect somebody's life. And what is perfection as defined in the Shastra? It's defined as not being disturbed even in the midst of the greatest difficulty. So they give you this instruction about how to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You follow their instruction. And when you reach perfection, it doesn't matter. I could get in a car accident. I could get this problem go wrong, that problem go wrong. My spouse could leave me. My children could die, whatever. And yet you stay steady. That is perfection. So the Brahmanas are very dear to Krishna. So so these Brahmanas, they're very dear to Krishna. And why is this? Because they have this knowledge that human society is actually looking for, that gives them the meaning and the purpose of life. And because the Brahmanas are very dear to Krishna, they're naturally very dear to the devotees of Krishna. And Prithu Maharaj, he is a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when the four Kumaras are coming here on the scene, Prithu Maharaj is offering them for all sorts of worship, giving them respect, because they're very dear to Krishna. And when one actually worships the devotee of Krishna, Krishna sees that, and Krishna likes that, and you get Krishna's mercy. And as part of that mercy, what happens is that the devotee becomes pleased because they see this humility. And then therefore, they want to impart some instruction that will help you in your life. So we see this in the first canto with Vyasadeva. As Vyasadeva, he wrote down the Vedas. And then he split them up into 4 different categories. Seeing that Kali Yuga was approaching and that the minds of people were going to become more degraded. Memories were going to become very short. So in an effort to help human society, he split everything up, tried to make it more simple, wrote down the Mahabharata, and still he felt morose. And sometimes that can happen in our service. We can be doing something, doing our service for our guru or whatever, but there can be something about it that makes us feel unhappy. So Vyasadeva, he looked within himself. What is it? Why am I having this feeling? What's going on? Sometimes we might introspect like that. Why am I not feeling happy today? Why is something off? How was my chanting this morning? Did I forget my Gayatri? Have I not done my reading in several days? One devotee, she came to me. She had been reading Bhagavatam daily, 24 pages a day. Very, very happy, very, very blissful. And then one week she came to me and she said, I'm just really, really kind of unhappy. And I'm having this problem. I don't like what this devotee is doing. I don't like what that devotee is doing. I'm seeing faults in everybody. And I said to her, well, how's your Bhagavatam reading going? She said, well, I haven't done it in a week. I said, well, then start doing that again and then come back to me the next week and see how you feel. We'll see what's going on. So the next week she came back to me. Oh, everything is okay now. I started back my Bhagavatam reading, and then I realized my mind was just agitated. Sometimes that can happen because when we unplug from Krishna consciousness, then the mind kind of falls back into passion and ignorance, trying to enjoy. So Vyasadeva, he's introspecting. What's going on? Why am I morose? And then what happens? Narada Muni comes on the scene, and Narada Muni is given the similar respect that the four Kumaras are given here. Vyasadeva, he sees him, he respects him, he gives him a proper place to sit. And he gets very comfortable. And then at this time, Narada Muni begins to speak to Vyasadeva. And he tells Vyasadeva, the reason why you're so morose is because even though you've written these Vedic literatures down, people are not getting the point of life. They're learning how to enjoy in a religious way. So therefore, they're going to take this material enjoyment and they're going to think that this is the ultimate goal. That this material enjoyment is all in all. And they're going to think, okay, this is religious, but this is not the ultimate thing. As I heard in one lecture that said, Vyasadeva got caught up in bridge preaching. He was giving how to enjoy through the current kind of, but he wasn't actually giving the ultimate. And the Vedas, they are meant to help one elevate themselves gradually. But ultimately, you have to tell people what it is that they're shooting for. What's the point of your varnashram duty, etc., etc. What's the point of all these sacrifices? Because otherwise people just end up taking birth again and again, just maybe more pious births, but it doesn't actually get them to the goal. So Narada Muni, he says some very sweet things to Vyasadeva. And as I was rereading this part of the first canto, I thought this is just totally expert how Narada Muni does this. Because he tells him, you haven't broadcast the sublime spotless message of the personality of Godhead. But then, not only does he tell him that, but what does Narada Muni do after that? He gives his disciple a personal experience. So not just giving the Shastra, but also showing practically how this works. And as we know, Narada Muni, he got cursed to become the son of a maidservant. So he took a very low birth, son of a Sudra. And I actually asked once, who is Narada Muni's father? And as somebody said in a lecture, it's not even actually known. Because maidservants, anybody could have been his father. So it was a very, very low birth for that time, especially in Vedic society. Although now, you see these types of things all the time in society. But Narada Muni, he tells Vyasadeva, and I'm looking for these verses because they're very sweet. Hold on one second. Of course, I would lose them. Okay. He says here, "O great sage, as soon as I got a taste of the personality of Godhead, my attention to hear of the Lord was unflinching, and my taste developed. I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle coverings, for both the Lord and I are transcendental." So Narada Muni, he's talking about, during these rainy seasons, these great sages, they came, and he had a desire to hear from them. As I mentioned in the previous class, the desire was set the atmosphere was set for the 4 Kumaras to come on the scene. So therefore, Narada Muni had this desire to hear from these great personalities. So this has to be the first step in spiritual life. There has to be that desire and that humility. So Narada Muni, he had this. So therefore, he stays and he hangs out with these sages, during the rainy season. And he takes the remnants. And then Narada Muni says that he became very much attached to them. And then as they were leaving, those Bhaktivedantins, who were very kind to poor-hearted souls, instructed me in that most confidential subject, which is instructed by the personality of Godhead himself. And why did he get this instruction? Because he treated these sages very nicely. He received them very nicely. So therefore, they were very pleased. So they gave him this instruction. So the reason why I'm bringing this up, and I'll tie this all together in the end, but Narada Muni also says, by that he also says, by that knowledge, he was able to apply that. And he was able to perfect himself. And then he tells Vyasadeva, it is decided by the learned that the best remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activity to the service of the Supreme Lord. And then he goes and says at the end, O good soul, does not a thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing? So therefore, there's this desire to actually enjoy within the world. People want to hear about different personalities. But therefore, by switching that hearing to Krishna, one therefore becomes purified. In the same way, like when you get an injection in the doctor's office, sometimes they'll give you a disease that's like in the vaccine, and it'll make you immune to that disease. I remember I got an injection for pneumonia once. And I asked the doctor, how does this work? They said, we give you a little bit of pneumonia, so your immune system fights it off. And therefore, when when you get exposed to pneumonia, you don't catch pneumonia. So therefore, by switching this hearing to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one actually becomes purified and they attain perfection. But this hearing, it only happens through realized personality, by getting the mercy of a devotee. So therefore, Narada Muni tells Vyasadeva at the end, therefore, describe the Almighty Lord's activities, which you have learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankerings of great learned men, and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people who are always suffering from material pains. Indeed, there is no way to get out of such miseries. So one only actually gets out of the illusion by having the mercy of the devotees, by having the mercy of the Brahmanas. This is why the Brahmanas are very dear to Krishna. Because the Brahmanas will come and they will speak the truth. They will help enlighten people. And they will give people instructions that will, personal instructions that will help them elevate themselves. Like there was this story I read about Prabhupada with one of his disciples. Her husband had taken sannyas. So she had gotten these Jagannath deities. She wasn't exactly sure how they had arrived, but she had gotten these Jagannath deities before her husband took sannyas. And later, her husband decided that he was going to take sannyas. So she ended up taking these deities with her, to like different places. And she ended up in the Los Angeles temple. And she said at this time, nobody had deities of their own. Everybody kind of just worshiped the temple deities. And so she was one of the rare ones, you could say. And so what happened was the temple president at the time told her, you can't have these deities because Prabhupada said people living in the temple should not have their own deities. But she had become very attached to Jagannath, Baladeva, and Subhadra. Who can blame her? Jagannath, Baladeva, and Subhadra are very sweet. And anyone that has deities given to you, you become very attached to them. So you don't want to give them up for any other purpose. So she decided that she was going to talk to Srila Prabhupada. So she goes in to see Prabhupada one day. And she takes her deities with her. And then she takes them out of the box and puts them in front of Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada looks at the deity, he's like, oh, very nice. And he says, Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patagami Bharatame. Prabhupada offers his respects. And she pays her respects to Prabhupada. And she talks to Prabhupada about this, can I have these deities? She had, and Prabhupada said, your husband has taken sannyas. So therefore, you should take Jagannath and make Jagannath your husband. Make Baladev your son and Subhadra your daughter. Because every woman needs a husband, a son, and a daughter. And by doing this, by worshiping these deities, you will attain all perfection. So this is an example. The guru can give different instructions to different devotees at the time. But a guru will give you instructions. Guru will actually see what you need and give you instructions for how to elevate yourself. So this is what is so sweet about the acharyas, about the actual real brahmanas, is they enlighten people. And when one is enlightened, they become very, very happy. They teach one how to do devotional service to Krishna. Because Prithu Maharaj, as I mentioned before, he's already instructed his citizens to do their varnashram duty. And then at the end, he instructed them to worship the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas. Now he's practically showing how to worship the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas. So the last point Prabhupada made in the last purport that we read is that in Acharya, they not only teach, but they show by example. So Prithu Maharaj is showing by example how to receive saintly persons. He's showing throughout his life how to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Later, we're going to see how Prithu Maharaj retires and goes to the forest just to focus on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So through every step, he is also showing by example, just as the acharyas are showing by example. And this is why this is also, why we see they'll get so much respect. It's not just one of these, do as I say, not as I do. Do you ever get your parents to do that with you? My mother and father, they were smokers. So when I was a kid, they would tell me, do as I say, not as I do. Don't take up smoking. But they were always smoking, And we see that this doesn't work because whatever action a great man does, common men follow. So children naturally, they'll follow kind of the example of their parents. They'll go in that path. So when one is taught correctly, like Prithu Maharaj is teaching his citizens, you see that not only Prithu Maharaj is going to go back to Godhead, but all the citizens that follow his instructions are also going to go back to Godhead. And another thing we see from this chapter is that Prithu Maharaj not only gave these instructions, he's not only giving them he's not only showing by example, but he's also showing his citizens by, the 4 Kumaras coming on the scene, and he's inquiring from the 4 Kumaras. He's going to be showing his citizens that it's not just me that's saying these things, but these things are also backed up by the 4 Kumaras. Because as mentioned earlier, the 4 Kumaras are the most senior sons of Lord Brahma. They're older than Lord Shiva, even though they only appear to be about 5 years old. So Prithu Maharaj is showing that I'm following these teachings. I'm teaching you to follow these teachings. But then also the 4 Kumaras are backing up what I say. And then we saw again Lord Vishnu came before, and Lord Vishnu is backing up what's being said in this parampara. So that's our check, really. You might say, how do we know these people are saintly? How do we know what they're saying is true? But we can see, are they themselves actually following it? And is what they're saying, is it also backed up by other people within the line? So Prithu Maharaj is showing this all together. And throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, you will see this. A great personality comes, will teach something. It'll be backed up by somebody else. And you'll see how one person follows it and they perfect their life. So the Srimad Bhagavatam, we see throughout all 12 cantos, how it's our ultimate guidebook. So therefore, we can take it up and we can follow it, and we should see some result in our life as well. Otherwise, if you notice that one is teaching something and they're not following it, then you can kind of question, okay, they might be a cheater. But we're going to hear some very wonderful instructions from the 4 Kumaras coming up. And then also, right now, we're ending this section of the king receiving the 4 Kumaras. And so later, as starting tomorrow and the next day, Prithu Maharaj is going to glorify the 4 Kumaras so the citizens see their qualifications. And then he's going to ask them a question to benefit all of his citizens, which will take us up to the end of the chapter. We got a very long chapter. It's about 63 verses. So, just to summarize, these great personalities, they're received with great respect because they're the representatives of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they are offered the same respect as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the same way that a representative of the government or the king is offered the same respect as the king. And they're offered this respect because they're teaching the message of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're going to all these places, all these to help enliven the fallen conditioned souls, to teach them what the meaning of life is. Because everybody wonders at some point in their life, why am I here? What is this purpose? What am I meant to be doing? Everybody asks that question. If you don't ask that question, you're not really a human being. So the devotees, the brahmanas, the acharyas, they come to give that answer, which is why they're given all this respect. So vanchakalpa turbhyascha kripa sindhubhyo patitanam pavnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. All right, so that's my spiel. Questions or comments from the audience? All right. Yes, Prabhu.
I enjoyed how you described about how people today are worshiping the athletes and the entertainers and whatnot. And it reminded me of the way Jivananda Prabhu talks about it also. He says that members of a certain religious following. Oh, sorry. Members of some of our members in society of a certain religious following will typically go to church on Sunday morning and then come home and turn on the TV and start screaming at the TV for their football team or basketball team.
It's so true.
And so I was thinking of asking you, what do you consider worship? Like to give your, I've heard that to give your attention to something fully is that could be called worship, maybe.
Yeah, it's a form of worship. You're admiring, you're wanting to be like, you're giving the topmost respect to. I would think about it, just the fact that they're going home, they're turning on their TV, they're watching these, they're paying for that subscription,
Right, yeah.
So it's like, and that person, like, whoever that great personality is, they're receiving, some sort of material benefit from that person that's giving them that respect. Because otherwise they wouldn't have a job if somebody didn't pay for that subscription. So yeah, it's a form of worship. People want to follow some great personality. Natural. Yes.
Two things. One is like a worship of celebrities. Like it was like being a child. I remember like as like a guitar player, loving I would like worship these guitar players. Literally, it was like if the only thing I really needed to do was a puja. Otherwise, it was like devotion. Doesn't even say like even just saying their name. It would be like I'd say it with reverence. It was real worship. When I think back, and it makes me cringe how how bad it was, because that propensity is there. And we had this like obsession. Me and my friend Marcus, we were obsessed with these rock stars and things. So, but I was wanted to share too. You're talking about nice thing. It talks about serving the devotees, and like we can think sometimes, oh, we're serving, we're doing, all of this. But actually, I was just hearing Chaitanya Bhagavat. We're serving is also, we're chanting and all this. But I was hearing Chaitanya Bhagavat how Lord Chaitanya used to carry things for the devotees. He would clean their houses of the devotees. He would do all these menial services for the devotees, and so. We that attitude is, we also manifest that sometimes, but that's a bona fide attitude, to have that attitude of trying to just do the little things for the devotees. So.
Yeah, you notice how reading like Chaitanya Charitamrita, you see the activities of Lord Chaitanya, and you're like, oh wow, I want to be that humble. Or like cleaning the Gudicha temple. I remember after reading that pastime, I was like, I want to go clean like space really well. Yeah. Yeah.
You finished. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really like the point that you made that, we have this internal potency to enjoy, and that will never go away.
Yeah.
And so if you look at, taking the example of Tiger Woods, and people are, like wanting to see him, are cheering for him, especially when he's going through a divorce.
Yeah.
Yeah. The actual fact is he's so much in stress. There's so much of anxiety, but people probably, carry this adulation because they think that all that money and fame means that he's truly enjoying.
Right.
So they somehow kind of identify with that enjoyment, not really realizing that he's under severe stress and duress. And that's what Prahlad Maharaj, tells Hiranyakashipu, that you are, in spite of you, being so powerful, I see you constantly under stress and anxiety about me, because I'm worshipping somebody that whom you don't like.
Oh, yeah. Hiranyakashipu is a great example. Also, Indra is another one too, right? He's king of everything, heaven, all this, and yet he doesn't have Gautama's wife, so he's going after Gautama's wife.
True,
it's like
true.
whatever you have materially, it's not enough. There's always some anxiety.
Yeah. And I think we are so fortunate that, we've come to appreciate the humility and the service attitude that frees us from anxiety and instead gives us so much of bliss and happiness, just like Prabhu just mentioned now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes.
So I thought it was really interesting that you said, Vyasadeva, that you had heard that he was unsatisfied basically because he was doing bridge preaching, and he had kind of missed the whole point. And so I just think that's a really great reminder that bridge preaching is unsatisfying to the person doing the preaching, and it misses the whole point for the person you're preaching to.
Right.
So although you might get someone to hang around for a little bit, if they're not understanding what the actual point is, it's useless. So
Yeah, you have to give people the goal. You might have to do some things to help them get there. But if you just give them the step but not give them the actual goal, it's unsatisfying. Yeah.
I like what your Guru Maharaj, Bhakti Vikash Swami Maharaj says about bridge preaching. This is a good point, because sometimes we've seen it work actually, like Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was doing that and successfully made tons of people devotees. But you have to bridge them to the Sankirtan movement. You don't bridge them to your own movement. That's what most people want to do. They have this bridge preaching, and they don't actually it doesn't actually go anywhere. It's a bridge to nowhere, because they're not actually, it's all we're bridge preaching, but there's not actually leading someone to, being a devotee of Krishna, being serious, giving up sinful activity and chanting Hare Krishna. That's what we're about. And so if you're not bridging people to that, then it's useless. It's karmakanda.
Yeah.
At best.
And then they don't realize what's the difference between Hare Krishnas and this impersonalist group down the street or this new age group over there. They see it all as one. And it's scary because I've been in programs where people had tried this technique. Oh, we're not going to talk about Krishna. We're just going to try to elevate them to the mode of goodness. And somebody raises their hand and be like, oh, this is exactly what they preach at the Temple of the Universe, what Mickey Singer does. And I'm just like, no, that's not what we're about. So Prabhupada, even at the very beginning, he always, told people what the goal was. He might have been very lenient, but he never, in the very beginning, wrote rules and regulations, but he was very clear on what our goal was. And if you don't believe me, you can go listen to those lectures from 1966. They're not all just about, let's love each other. It's all good. Yeah. All right, we got to stop because they're bringing out breakfast. But thank you guys. Nice discussion.